How's it going, my Saab friends? My name is Gary and this is my channel, Weakest of Weeks. If you're a first-time viewer, I appreciate you clicking on the video and definitely consider subscribing. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than most of mine. Now, a lot of them I do spend in these four walls of my garage wrenching on things, and actually my 08 93 Aero, the laser red car, is just off camera here. So I kind of have a different backdrop of sorts for this video, but it is in my functional garage. So I do have my toolboxes here, nothing too exciting. What may be a very cool piece in the background, that is an actual Turbo X wheel. Unfortunately, don't have the center cap for it, but if you do have a center cap for sale, let me know. I may be interested. Use the link in the description and send me an email at weakestofweeks@gmail.com. Whenever I bought this, I did purposely buy it for just kind of wall art. I don't have a full-on matching set. I just ended up getting a singular wheel, and I'm hoping to find a good spot to hang it up on the wall, and figured it was a good backdrop for this particular video. And I know center caps are still available for these, at least the more silver ones, but this is like a darker graphite, and I just simply can't find a used one. So I love to get a center cap for that wheel. If you have one available, like I said, shoot me an email at weakestofweeks@gmail.com. But enough of that nonsense. This video has nothing to do with a random Turbo X wheel or my toolboxes in the background of this video. This is actually a follow-up to the last video I did, and that is about the 2011 Saab 94X Aero that I was able to test drive at a local dealership. Now, I understand whenever I made that video, and it's something I didn't realize until I think one or two people commented on it, and then I went back and watched the video, I seem pretty reserved, whereas a lot of my videos I am overly excited and animated, just that's how I am. I'm very passionate about working on things, and especially Saabs. So looking back at that video, I kind of laughed a little bit because I realized I wasn't that, I don't know, I didn't come off as what I think myself as normal, like the over animated side of me. But it was one of those things that days leading up to that test drive, I knew that dealership had that vehicle, and I just had so much excitement leading up to it. And then I was scared that by the time I got there, it was already going to be sold. So whenever I got there, the 94X was actually at the front of the dealership. Normally you have to walk a lot, figure out where the car is at, find a sales rep to get the keys, test drive it, all that stuff. But this one was actually literally at the front of the dealership. So whenever I rolled up, I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, is this car in contract right now? Is somebody gonna buy this? So by the time I got there, it was almost surreal in a sense. And I was able to back my 93 up right next to it. And then whenever I hopped out, I just wanted to look over it real quick because, again, I thought somebody else was in the process of signing the paperwork for this. Well, then a sales rep comes out and mentioned to me how somebody was in fact interested in it, but they couldn't get the credit approval for it. So it was literally going right back on the lot. And then if I wanted to test drive it, which I ultimately ended up doing, I could. So he gave me the keys, and before I even drove it, I kind of looked over it real quick before I even started to film, because honestly, I didn't want the dealership to see me right off the bat start filming this vehicle. It might be a little bit awkward, but a good buddy of mine, he's actually a mechanic at that dealership, and he's the one that initially told me that 94X was at that dealership. And the sales rep actually laughed and he said, "Oh, you're the one that does YouTube. That's pretty darn cool." And I kind of was starstruck by that a little bit, because I'm just honestly some Joe Schmo off the street that tinkers on these Saabs and posts videos in hopes of helping other people out. So I kind of got a little bit of a kick out of that, and he just basically tossed me the keys and said, "Have at it, go ahead and test drive it, and we'll talk numbers when you get back." So I was excited internally, I think, but it didn't really come off as that when I was filming. So I do apologize, but deep down inside, I was extremely excited to drive such a rare Saab. And I understand a lot of people say, well, that's not a true Saab, blah, blah, blah. I honestly don't care if it's more GM than the original Saabs out there. I love either one of them. Honestly, I love a lot of different makes and models, not just cars, trucks, motorcycles, so many different things. I'm not only passionate about Saabs, but simply the automotive industry in general. So to say it's not actually a Saab, a piece of me understands that, but at the end of the day, It's still wearing a Saab emblem, multiple ones of those. So in my opinion, it's still a Saab, and a rare one at that. So I was very lucky and fortunate to test drive that 94X. I took it for a quick spin, was able to stop on the side of the road in a parking lot and kind of privately look over it closer and share that journey along with you friends. Now, there's a couple points of mention about that 94X. I mean, had 120,000 miles on it, and I think, relatively speaking, it aged pretty well, but the unfortunate part is I live in the United States. I live in a Rust Belt state, central Ohio, which is not as bad as a lot of other states out there, and also not as bad as a lot of other parts of the country that get a lot of rock salt and chemicals put onto the road to de-ice them to make them safer. Well, unfortunately, that type of salt and chemicals and all that stuff corrodes and rusts the vehicles away. So this one, I think the body of it was in very good shape based on the miles, and especially because it lived a majority of its life in Ohio. It did have routine dents. It had a couple odd ones that I don't think you were able to see on the camera. At the top, kind of where the roof rack is, there was actually 2 major dents on both sides of the roof. So however they were loading and unloading a roof rack of some sort, they definitely damaged the roof, but I honestly didn't care because it was so high up, you're really not going to notice unless you're taller than myself, and I barely noticed it, and I'm over 6 feet tall. So that wasn't a big deal breaker for me. There was a couple other little dents, you know, things and dents on doors and things like that, but that wasn't a big concern. But what was concerning was a literal hole in the front bumper. I asked the sales rep about it, and he thought it was factory, which I understand. At a quick glance, it looked like it could have been for, say, like a tow hook to screw in, but no, you could definitely tell it was like a burn, like a melt mark into that front bumper. Now, fortunately, the 94X Aero, I don't believe, has a specific bumper to it. I think it's just an overall general 94X front bumper you can put on there, but the Aeros do have the additional fog lights. So I think I could get away with replacing just a regular 94X bumper, and then just swapping over all the componentry like those fog lights. And then I think for the body side of things, that was a little kind of eye-opening, were the taillights. From the photos before I even saw the car, the taillights look perfectly fine. I don't know 100% the functionality of it, but a lot of those taillights with that big LED light bar on the back, which you can see on 95s, also these 94Xs, they are notorious for going out. Now, there are some good companies out there that you can get rebuild kits for those center light bars, but they're expensive. So you can send your light bar off to them, they'll refurbish it, send it back to you, and you can just reinstall it, or you can buy a DIY kit and refurbish it yourself. So I thought about that when purchasing the vehicle. That might be a worthwhile video to do. I don't know if there's one out there already about that, but then the more concerning part was the outside taillights, specifically the driver's side one, was very chipped, and if I wanted it to be in a very good drivable, usable condition, I'd most definitely want to replace that taillight, and they are unobtainium. They are extremely difficult to find, and when you can find one, you're gonna have to pay up. So the body side of it, not bad for a project. The hood also needed replaced if I wanted it to look pretty decent. The engine bay had some, I would say, routine corrosion on it, some rust, nothing of any major concern. However, there was one random wire that appeared to be repaired, had a butt crimp connector on it, which was a little concerning, but as far as a mechanical standpoint, I don't think there was anything majorly wrong coming from that engine bay. But when I did drive it, I noticed that it drove very similar to a Turbo X, just a bit bloated. I mean, it's got the 2.8 liter V6 turbo. It is all-wheel drive. I don't know if the transmissions, the automatic transmissions, are the same, the 9.3 versus the 9.4X. I don't know anything as far as that goes, but in my honest opinion, it drove similar to a Turbo X, just heavier and more bloated. But it was fun. It was peppy, but whenever I stomped on the brakes, it left a lot to be desired. Definitely needed some brake work, and that was some leveraging stuff that I took to the sales rep whenever I returned back from my test drive. I mentioned the hole in the bumper, the taillights that needed worked. you know, just the overall condition of it, the brakes, they were kind of lacking. And then also another concerning part wasn't so much the body, but the underside of it. It had a trailer hitch that was on it for some time. I could tell that was kind of withering away. The structure of it seemed pretty solid, but I would venture to guess that it probably would need some replacement if I were to tow with it. And then there was some wires frayed underneath it for that trailer hitch. Again, not that big of a deal. It is what it is. But another concerning part was the fact that the subframes, and I don't know if it came on camera, but the subframes were extremely rusty. And I'm not talking just some surface rust. If I were to take a screwdriver and poke it, I would guesstimate that that screwdriver would poke right through that subframe. And speaking of the subframes, you have the differential, the hull decks in the back because it is all-wheel drive. There was 0 service records on that, and that was pretty concerning. Now, when I test drove it, there were no check engine lights that I know of. I mean, the dealership, I suppose, could have cleared them, but there was 0 service history, including anything on that hull deck. So I used all that stuff as leveraging to negotiate a price, but at the end of the day, the dealership did not want to budge off their price. And I don't blame them. We're in a buyer's market for them currently at this time, so they know they can hold out for somebody that more than likely does not know a single thing about a Saab or a Saab 94X specifically, and they are going to sell it to them. So that's a little unfortunate, but you know, I understand it from their perspective, and for me, it just didn't make sense. So why I'm here telling you this story, this is basically a long-winded way of saying I unfortunately did not purchase that 2011 Saab 94X Aero. As much as I wanted to, it just wasn't feasible, it wasn't justifiable. I have my 0893 Laser Red Aero. I absolutely love this car. I've had it for many years. It's kind of my forever project. If you've been following around for some time, I had another 0893 Aero. That was my sabotage, the Fusion Blue metallic car that we basically brought up from the ashes and smacked the ugly off it, got it back on the road, and eventually I did sell that. So that money that I sold that 93 Aero, the blue one, I ended up putting towards what my daily driver is now, and that is a 2015 and a half Volvo XC60 R Design. And that's kind of another reason why I did not purchase this 94X, because ultimately when it comes down to it, I do have another SUV, and honestly, I really love that Volvo. I bought it on a whim. I didn't know a whole lot about them. I was just so frustrated at that point in time over a year ago. I tried to buy 3 different 94Xs and they just didn't pan out. That's how I ultimately ended with my Volvo. So there's a lot of factors for consideration here, but ultimately I did not buy that 94X. So I do apologize, but it just wasn't feasible at this point in time in my life. I don't have a lot of space. I actually have a project motorcycle, another one that I picked up. I have a truck that I'm gonna have here on the channel. One owner that was from my grandfather that I'm pretty excited to get. I don't know where I'm gonna put it. I don't have a whole heck of a lot of space, but that's a problem for me to figure out. And hopefully in the near future, I'll be able to pick up a different Saab project. So I appreciate you making it this far in the video. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, drop a comment down below. Oh, I did want to ask one thing. Would you friends be interested in any merch? I don't know. I've never really fancied the idea of merch. Again, I'm just some Joe Schmo doing some repair videos on Saabs. So I never really thought about doing merch, but my wife actually made this shirt for me, and I think it's pretty cool. So if you guys are interested in any merch, please drop a comment down below, and that way I can gauge some interest to see if it's worthwhile to do. So I'll quit rambling here. If you like this style of video, definitely give it a thumbs up. If you want to hear more random stories about some of my Saab adventures, or I guess some other projects or some other stuff that's in the background, let me know. I'd love to hear it. I do like doing some different types of formats and kind of keeping things fresh and switching things up. So enough rambling here. Again, I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you friends next time.